All right, let's see. Here's one from Friday on the website. You said you were a mess when you were young and suffered bouts of depression and anxiety. True. Although after the Bermuda days, once I really got into high school. What steps did you take to gain control of your life and become a successful businessman? Well, I'm not a successful businessman, but we'll continue on. Role model to a group of scalawags and layabouts and miscreants and other forms of moss analogy. Well, that's the question, isn't it? I'm not running away from it. I'm just trying to think about the best way to answer this. What did I do? The first thing I did was just hit bottom. You know, It comes a point when you just can't take anymore. And and for those of us who've been through this kind of mess, we talk sometimes about having a low bottom or a high bottom. And I was lucky I had a high bottom, which means that when things hurt so bad for me, I couldn't take it anymore. And I decided to do something about it. It was well before I was underneath an overpass with a needle in my arm. But many of the people who I spent a year or two with, hi, how are you? We're good, thank you very much. No, thanks. Good night. But some of the people I know who I spent some time with who really meant a lot to me were in that shape. They were really that far gone. I had a roommate for a year there when I was in Narcotics Anonymous, and I was the only person, this is the truth, I was the only person in Narcotics Anonymous who didn't have a narcotics problem. But I did have an addictive personality problem. There's no question about that. And that, I guess I just escaped through, science fiction, fantasy. I slept a lot. And my dad at an early age just pounded the don't do drugs into me from such a young age. I always felt like I'd never come back from that road. But yeah, I just emotionally just got more and more unstable. I remember very clearly in college, I would be at a restaurant with a bunch of other actors, and we'll all be having a fine time. And somebody would say something, and it wasn't even about me. It was just something, and like the whole thing, just the whole personality collapsed. Natasha sees this every now and then. It just it takes all of 20 seconds, and I just turn into ice. I just completely freeze. I don't freeze physically, but emotionally, just shut down, and I just I just become this kind of absolutely silent thing, and people start saying, "What's the matter with you?" It's like, nothing. I'm going to go home now. What do you mean you're going home? We just got here. Yeah, no, it's all right. I just feel like I should go home. All right, well, I'll drive you home. No, you don't have to drive me home. I'm going to walk. Bill, it's 3 miles. It's 11:30 at night. No, I'll just walk. So I would walk. So there was obviously there's a fair amount of chemical instability there, but I didn't know it at the time. So I've been trying to make movies ever since I lost the Air Force Academy. I was 17 years old. That shook me up real hard, real hard. So that was 1976, between my junior and senior years in high school, and then I made movies that year, which kept me alive. My friend Fritz, who's a year older than me, had already gone to the University of Florida, was majoring in theater. Came up to visit him for a while, and for like 2-3 days, and I said, you can actually, this is school? Yeah, this is school. In fact, you can get financial aid to go to school like this. So I went up to Gainesville and hung out with actors, and and I just really felt awful. I'd had real bad acne when I was a kid, and the worst of it was for me. See, Bermuda gave me so many advantages, and you just saw all of them. But oh, thank you very much. I'm sorry, just somebody Taurus Vint. I'm sorry, I can't. Vision's not what it used to be, but that's very kind. Somebody just wrote something very nice there. Anyway, I just the benefits of Bermuda was I went to this incredible all boys school, and the disadvantages of Bermuda was I went to this incredible all boys school. When I came to American schools in 5th grade, I was 2 grades ahead of them in terms of what I knew, and I was at least 2 or 3 grades behind them in social skills because it was a boys' school, and we wore uniforms, and all of a sudden I find myself in school and everybody's dressing different every day, and yeah, it really was rough. So anyway, I got up to college and I would just have these emotional collapses. Just it's hard to explain. It is exactly like watching a house of cards coming down, though. I mean, you'd be just fine, and then pow. So that's pretty obviously bipolar, I would guess. And I have to think most of that was chemical, honestly. But it was before Prozac, so I had no way of knowing. Anyway, I decided I was going to try and make movies, and this is the most absolute certain recipe for the destruction of your life that has ever been invented: is trying to get money together for a low budget film. It's just horrible. You wait and wait and wait and wait, and people who keep putting you off, and you get older, you realize from once you've had enough of heartbreak, you learn that they were never serious in the first place. But when you're young and desperate, you don't know that. So I just spent a couple of years just like waiting for lawyers to write prospectus and things like that. It's just terrible. Finally, my friend from high school found some money, and I wrote a script. It was the worst script I ever wrote in my life by a wide margin. And we went out and shot most of it, and then the money fell through, and the producer was a coke addict, and I'm surrounded by the flaming wreckage of this feature film, which I still have nightmares to this day about. Just like this unfinished wreckage of a movie that is just, can I put together? I must have had this dream 2 or 3 nights ago. I didn't even think about it until just now. But it's like, I've got to find a way to save this thing. You can't save it. It's just useless. I hadn't realized until this exact second that I still have nightmares about that. That really messed me up. Anyway, I was just met these actresses and actors in the movies, and I just was, zero self-confidence. And shortly after that, on November 7th of 1985, I woke up. I just woke up crying. Woke up crying. I just couldn't stop, and called my mom. She was working at a counseling center, and I think if she finally heard me, so she said, "Okay, hang on," and called me back 10 minutes later and said, "Come on in and see this woman, Shotzi Casal, who was a behavioral therapist." And I walked in there kind of dressed up, and we got to be friends after several years, and then she told me later when we got to be friends that when I first walked in, she thought I was a vampire. I was just dressed in black. I was so pale, it was practically blue. And she asked me what the problem was, and I said, "I don't know. Everything's the problem." She said, "I want you to go to this meeting." Or, "What kind of meeting?" It's an Narcotics Anonymous meeting. I remember clearly saying, "Look, I'd be willing to bet you the only problem in the world that I don't have is a drug or drink problem." She goes, "It's okay. You should just go." So I've told this story many times. I'm not going to go through that again right now. But anyway, I went. My friend Suzanne Donzella made me go, thank God. And that's when I ran into all of these people in Narcotics Anonymous who had the exact same problem I did, except I was just finding a different medication, just escaping to my imagination and stuff. And so Narcotics Anonymous and the therapy was useful in addressing some of the behaviors that you get into and the consequences of those behaviors. You really just have to construct your personality. And, these pictures that I showed are so, it just looks so idyllic. But the fact is, I never really felt like I had parents. I never really felt that sense of security. Most people with good parents are able to deal with setbacks and stuff because they've had people there to protect them and make sure they don't hit the ground. I never had that sense. And so you have to go back and kind of learn how to parent yourself. When I say I never had that sense, it's not quite true. I got into some real financial trouble with the IRS in 2011. And I flew out to Arizona and talked to Jerry Stipp, the guy who I did that kind of pig Photoshop for. And I basically told him about the problem. He said, "Okay, well, we'll take care of it. We'll figure it out." And I remember thinking, this is what it's like to have parents. I was probably 52. That was definitely the experience. It wasn't like, yeehaw. It was just like, oh, now I know. Now I know what it's like to have people catch you before you hit the ground. Anyway, I got to American public schools late, and I was way behind socially. And most of the people I was in school with had known each other, boys and girls, since elementary school. And I hadn't, just before I left Bermuda in 72, I went to a party where there were girls there, and I was just lost, absolutely lost. And as time went by, I got further behind on that boat. But there was that day. It was November 7th, 1985. I just decided I can't take this anymore. And I made a phone call, and I started going to this therapy thing. I started going to Narcotics Anonymous meetings once a day. I went at least 9 months without missing a day. And many times I go twice, and on the holidays I go 3 times a day. Holidays are very bad for addicts, very bad. And up until the time I got married, holidays were just like a terror for me. And I mean, we're talking 3, 4, 5 years ago. It just, oh God, here it comes again. Here comes Christmas. That's changed. So I was doing that, and just, white knuckling it. That's the only term for it. Just toughing it out. I have been so far down and so lonely and been in such dark places, mentally and physically, and just, wondering how the hell I got here, and how the hell I was going to get out of here. And I have been. There were many years, and again, I'm talking about now. We're talking about time since. This is even like 5 years ago, or less. I just thought I am the loneliest person on planet Earth. I just talk to my cats. That's it. And it just got miserable. I got famous. That helped, but that was much later. What really helped was the behavioral therapy twice a week, Narcotics Anonymous every day, because Narcotics Anonymous put me around people who were exactly like me, and who cared about me, and really did care about me. And if you're suffering from that kind of thing, loneliness or depression or whatever the case may be, I cannot recommend it highly enough. I thought they'd be nothing but a bunch of blank-eyed drug addicts and stoners. They were the most interesting and the funniest people I ever met. But that was something I could do every day, and that's something to look forward to. The meeting took 2 hours, and then we go out for 2 hours after that. That got me through the night, So that worked. And then in 1993, I was still in Florida. It was the last time I worked at the Miami Planetarium. They were relaunching a show called Child of the Universe, which I'd run 20 years earlier. So they hired me back to do that. And I got a call from Shotzi. This is 1993 now. I was 85 when I first met her. And she'd always tell me, there's no magic pill you can take for this. There's no magic pill. There's no shortcut. You're just going to have to either go through it or not. I mean, that's pretty much your choices. And, we're here to help you, but we can't do it for you. Shotzi gave me some very quick advice that made an enormous difference, and little things that made an enormous difference. I was dressing in like black and dark colors. She said, try to dress a little brighter. So I wore I found like colors like this, like a bright red shirt and white pants. And this is Miami, so you could get away with it. And, and like a yellow belt. And she said, get some sun. And I got some sun. And honest to God, just the suntan and dressing in different colors just was enormous. Plus I put on, I don't know, went from probably 125 to 135, 140, which is still pretty thin, but not concentration camp thin, which was most of my adolescence. Turned sideways and become invisible. And anyway, so in 1993, she gave me a call and said, remember how I told you this whole time that there's no magic pill for this? I said, I do. She said, well, it turns out I may have been wrong about that. And I said, oh, really? She said, yeah, come on in, I want to talk to you. So I went in, and she handed me one of these little drug starter kits, the kind of samples that the doctors give out for this medication called Prozac. And I'll never forget it. The box had like a series of like pastel-colored lines lines like this, and at the bottom there's a big disturbance, and every single layer up is a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, till finally on the top it was nice and smooth. I thought that's pretty much it. The Prozac was the first of the SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Basically, they increase your level of serotonin by decreasing your brain's ability to take it out of your system. And serotonin is a mood buffer, and it has a lot to do with mood. And I was easily 2 quarts low on serotonin. So some little thing would happen to me and I would just go completely off the deep end both ways, either over the moon happy or in the absolute gutter, destroyed. And swinging back and forth like a lunatic, because I was a lunatic. I was completely nuts, absolutely nuts. And a lot of that was due to the chemical imbalance. So you take Prozac, and it normally takes about 3-4 days to come up into your system fully. Manic depressive, yeah, I suppose that's pretty fair. Bipolar, I think, is usually what they call it. But just see, it's like people talk about bipolar and manic depressive and stuff. These terms they're accurate, but it's not really. It doesn't feel like that. It just feels like you're like a pendulum, and you're like a pendulum. Whoever you are watching this, you could be the most well-adjusted person in the world, and you're like a pendulum, and something bad hits you, and it moves you to sad, and then normal people come back to this. And I would do that too, but when the same exact thing hit me, instead of it going like this, I would go, wah, 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 wah. It's like the oscillation rate was just insane. Little things would just be end of the world for me. So anyway, like I said, 3 days, usually 3-4 days for Prozac to really come online. But I took some in the afternoon in 1993. I don't remember when it was. I think it was in March. Went to bed, and I woke up the next day, and I said, so this is what it's like. This is what being normal is like. I just overwhelming difference. Just like, oh, I see. Okay, well, so you find yourself now with an enormous aid. The medications, and it's just an indescribable aid, but you're still stuck with the wreckage of 30 years of being a lunatic, and not only is there the wreckage of your finances are wrecked, your relationships, you don't have any relationships, you barely have your best friends, but you do have your best friends, and if I didn't, I'd be dead by now, long time ago. If it weren't for Steve and Fritz, they really got me through, and Suzanne. But mostly the wreckage consists of behaviors and beliefs, like mental habits, but mostly just beliefs that you've just taken to be true. I remember clear as day, like it was yesterday. It was 1980 or 81. I was in a friend's car. We were at the corner of 13th Street and right down there by Beatty Towers. We were stopped at a light. And I don't know why we were in a convertible. It was his dad's convertible, something. I was there with a friend of mine, and I was sitting in the right seat. He was sitting in the left seat. And this car pulled up next to us, and inside this car were these 2 really cute girls. And the light changed, and one of them whistled, and I turned to Josh, and I said, I think that was for me. He said, yeah, I think it was for you too. I was just shocked, stunned. And so, you start changing your behavior, and basically what it consists of is just plain hard work. And the hard work is very simple. You've been doing something one way your entire life. It's your automatic impulse to want to go back to that place. When things go wrong, you go back to that destructive place. You live there your entire life. You don't want to be there, but you know it. It's not pleasant, but it's kind of comfortable in a way. It's it's misery, but I'm used to this misery. And then you start trying to change, and you do well for a while, and you're feeling great, and you're in a pink cloud, and then you kind of collapse again, and you feel bad, like it's never going to change, ever going to change. It's going to be the same thing again and again and again. I'm going to make the same mistakes again and again and again. I'm going to It's just, I'm broken. I can't do it. It's just, it doesn't matter how much I try to change. I can't change. I'm a victim of these emotional chains that I'm in. But very slowly, and I mean over years and years, you start to change, and then you start picking up new information. And new evidence is the word. Evidence is a much better word. Like that situation with the girls in the car. That was evidence that I wasn't as goofy looking as I thought I was. And then you feel a little bit better, and you feel a little bit better, and you get more evidence. And then you just kind of hold on to these things because you've been believing one thing your whole life. And finally, you start to see evidence of stuff that, maybe people do like you. Maybe I was going to a rehearsal for one of the two plays I was in. I played Tony Kirby. So I was the male romantic lead in You Can't Take It With You. I went because the actress I knew wanted a partner to read with, and I got the role, and she didn't because there were 25 women turned out and 2 men. So I got the romantic lead. That alone amazed me. But I was in the car, I was heading out to a rehearsal, and we were leaving acting class, and this actress leaned in the car and said something like to the person driving, said, "You take care of that face there, And I just said, "What? You talking to me?" She was talking to the other person, talking about me. And you just kind of hang on to these things, and then you start feeling a little better. And you start feeling a little better, and then you start to feel like, okay, it might be a little bit easier for me now to make these changes in my life because I've got a little bit of evidence that maybe some of the stuff that I took as gospel maybe it's not true. And then you start to get on an upward spiral, and then things can happen pretty fast. They happen real fast for me, real fast, because of eject. Because of you guys. I was just miserable. Life would pass me by. And I wrote this blog, and people responded to it, and I'd get these comments in the comment section, and it made me a new person. It made me into the kind of person I always wanted to be, the kind of person I'm getting closer to be. And then I did the videos, and then along comes FOA, which is kind of defunct now, so we can talk about it a bit. Next thing you know, I'm in a restaurant, and Gary Sinise asked me to come in because I could put down some intellectual artillery. And I swear to God, I'm not dropping names. I found myself in a room, and I'm sitting at a table, and I don't know, 7 or 8 of us or something. It's me, Andrew Breitbart, Bruce Boxleitner was there, Robert Duvall, John Malkovich, Tom Selleck, Gary Sinise, John Voight, and me. And, wow. It's just, I just don't tell anybody, Breitbart and I actually both had that same experience. Neither one of us could believe we were there because we were surrounded by legends. T-Dog Gly says, Malkovich, I was at a party at Patty Heaton's house when this whole thing started, right when it started, 2007. I came in the first week of December 2007. And a few months later, I found myself in Beverly Hills. This is exactly how it happened. I was invited to this relatively small party because I could do what I do, and I was good at it, and even movie stars thought I was good at it. And I found myself at this party, and Gary Sinise was hosting a party. He'd started the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago with John Malkovich and a bunch of other actors, and he was kind of introducing John to the club. And I went outside, mostly just to clear my head, and it was cold. Cold by LA standards, but by LA standards it was cold, and I wasn't dressed. It was probably in the 40s or maybe even the high 30s. And I was standing outside here, just getting some fresh air, trying not to faint at the fact that I'm in this party. And I turned to my left, and there's John Malkovich, come out to light a cigarette. John frickin' Malkovich. This is exactly true. Exactly like this, burned into my brain. I'll never forget it. And I just trying to be, you don't want to be obsequious and you don't want to be familiar either. So, hey, John, how are you? Because we've been introduced to her. Oh, I'm good, Bill, good. And then he said, now, is it Bill Whittle or Bill Little? I said, it's Bill Whittle. He said, I thought so. Yeah, I've read a lot of your stuff. I really love it. There, a lot of times I wanted to make a comment, but I just kind of thought no. But it's just really, really good stuff, and I've enjoyed many of them. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Really? That's not what I said. I just said like, oh, well, thanks, John. It's nice. I was going to leave a comment. If I'd seen the comment by John Malkovich in Eject, I would have been 100% positive it was a joke that somebody was playing on me. That kind of thing is good for your ego. And when you, and I think it's probably time to close the show with this, but here's the funny thing. It's not funny when you think about it. It makes perfect sense. The more insecure you are and the more afraid you are, the more determined you are to show everybody how smart you are and how powerful you are. And I spent a period of my life walking around with a big neon sign around my neck that said film director. I couldn't go to a 7-Eleven without talking about how I was working on this movie or that movie. I see that all the time here in Los Angeles, all the time, and I see it from other people too. And having been there, I know it's just this kind of arrogance and arrogance, pride. Not good pride, not quiet pride, just kind of, vanity pride. And it's weird because sometimes the more hollow you feel, the more you have to prove it. I nearly lost all my friends. I was a monster for a while. I was just a monster. Really was. Honestly, I was just a arrogant, nasty show off, and I was just. I don't know how they stayed with me, but they did. I guess they probably knew deep down that I wasn't really that guy. I was just having to say those things. But anyway, I was just a beast. And so when things started to go much better for me, with Eject, and then PJTV, and then I started doing videos and speaking events, which meant that I started getting recognized. I had been through 20 years of just raw misery. I didn't have 4 figures in the bank. I didn't have more than hundreds of dollars in the bank until I was 48. 48 or 49. I remember it's the first time I'm going, I have consistently had a 4-figure bank balance now. That's a long time to be really pretty poor and short of money and all of the stuff that entails and all of that nightmare and the amount of brain power it sucks out of you and happiness it sucks out of you, worried about money all the time for 30 years. It's not good. And so I just got kicked in the teeth, a lot by life. And I remember, I'll never forget this. I went to one of the first speaking events I ever went to. I probably told the story once or twice before. But I went to one of the first speaking events I'd ever been to in my life as a speaker. And it wasn't a huge crowd. And let's just say it was Wisconsin. It feels like it was Wisconsin, although I don't remember where it was exactly. And afterwards, there's a Q&A period. And after it was over, these people came down. And one guy came down, he was a pretty fat guy, and he was wearing coveralls, the denim coveralls. And I remember this thought going through my head, thinking, wow, I wish I was on the other team. If I was on the other team, the people that'd be coming down here would be movie stars and all of that stuff. And the second I had that thought, I just was like, what's the matter with you? I just looked at this guy, and he had a real country look to him, real country sound to him. And I just right then on the spot, I remember thinking, this guy knows more about hundreds of things than I do. Hundreds of things he knows more about than I do. He's an expert in certain things in his life. It may not be, you know, may not be commedia dell'arte, and it might just be dairy farming. But he knows more about it than I do, and you better not ever have that attitude again. And I didn't, and it's kind of like I don't know. I remember consciously making it clear to myself that I was never ever ever gonna go down that road again. Never. That I would be the last person out of the room in any event I was on. I'd be the last person out of the room, and that's what I've done. I've done hundreds of speaking events, and there's only one time once that I got shot out of there after it was over, and that was because they had to get me to an airplane. It was the last plane out for the night. But I am the last person out of the room. I'll talk to people for an hour, 2 hours afterwards, and I love it. And I learn a lot of stuff. Sometimes it's a little bit annoying, but almost always I just love it. And I run into people who are Stratosphere Loungers, or people who've been members, or people who were back in the eject days, and it's like meeting old friends, you know. And it's not like a false modesty. It's just a real sense that there's nothing I'm doing that's particularly extraordinary. You know, I didn't invent any of this stuff. I'm not a painter of America, you know. I don't invent things. I'm just a photographer. Just take pictures and put things together. And it has never been a problem, ever. I've been picked up at the airport in stretch limousines, which I drove for years. I don't like stretch limousines. But I've been picked up by, the back of Lincoln Town cars, which is nice. And I've also been picked up much more often by people in a 7-year-old pickup truck with the front seats just covered in dog hair and the dog sitting right next to it. And it smells like wet dog, and that's more often than the town car, and I actually like that. I just think it's great. I've never ever had anybody ask me, "Do you mind if we do pictures?" or something. Take every picture there is to take. I love taking pictures. I love talking to people at the end of the show, but I never ever forget it. I never forget that they're the people who make all of this possible, which is why I always close the show the same way as I'm going to close it right this second. This show is made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com. If it weren't for the couple of thousand people who've been signed up for this, no one would know who I am. There never would have been an Apollo special. There never would have been any of that stuff. And I certainly wouldn't be living in this beautiful rented house in Sherman Oaks with my astonishingly beautiful wife, who's much more beautiful on the inside than she is on the outside, and that whole life is made possible by, people that are watching now. And I never forget it. I never forget it. I don't think I've ever signed off the show without saying that. And if I did, it was because it's just because something happened. But and because I never forget it, and because I never forget to be grateful ever, I'm just enormously happy. I love doing the speaking events. I love meeting people. I was MC of an event a couple nights ago, big event, not in terms of numbers, but 300 people. And it was just real smooth up there. And I've never had stage fright. I've never been worried. Never been afraid of, except for the first time I went to that cafe with Russell there. That time I was genuinely nervous. But beyond that, I just sit there calmly and I don't know what's going to come out. I've got notes. I don't know what I'm going to say. But I do know that whatever it is that I do is not going to desert me when I need it, because it doesn't belong to me. It's not me and it's not mine, and I'm not even renting it. I just go out there, and the first line is mine. First line of everything I do is, "Hi, everybody." That's the first thing I say at every speaking event, everything I ever do, ever. I get the "Hi, everybody" out, and then for the rest of the time, I'm just a conduit. I suspect there's something metaphysical to it, although I'm not going to give it to you in metaphysical terms. I don't know what it is. I just know that I get up there, and all of the stuff that I put into my head, and all of the pain that went into my head, and all that stuff comes out and all of the language stuff, and it just comes out nicely sometimes. And that's why I'm so anxious to see video of speaking events that I've done, because I kind of want to know what I said, and I want to know how I said it. It's not hypnosis or anything, but it is definitely flow. Just, it's just, I, I, I was more comfortable speaking in front of hundreds or thousands of people than I was being by myself at a party. I'm orders of magnitude more comfortable doing that. So, but basically, I'm really kind of a shy person. Natasha will tell you it's been hard on her because I generally don't like going out to loud places, or my nightclub days are behind me, and I love doing the speaking events. I love doing work-related trips, but just going out to clubs and stuff, I just get, I can do 2 hours, 3 hours, and after 3 hours, I got to get out of there, and that's not really fair to her at all, and I feel bad about that. But I really am just kind of fundamentally shy. And the nice thing about being Orson Bean had a word for this. Did I mention this last week or 2 weeks ago? Maybe not. Orson Bean was on that interview show I did back in 13, was it? 14? And he said something I really liked. He said, I wouldn't call myself famous. He said, I'm famish. And everybody laughed and said, well, what do you mean? He said, I'm famish. I'm not famous. People don't stop me all over the place and say, oh my God, look, it's Orson Bean. But, I get invited to nice parties, and I do this, and I have a nice, comfortable living, and I get enough recognition and praise for me to be constantly grateful and all the rest of it. So I'm famish. And that's kind of how I feel. And being famish is great. I'd love to tell you that it wasn't. It's not. It's wonderful. It's wonderful being famish. And the reason it's wonderful is because if you're a very shy person, being famish handles all of your introductions for you. People come up and say hi, and I would never go up and say hi to them because I'm just basically, I've never been that guy. I'm always the guy at the party. If I don't go with somebody, I'm in the corner. I sit there for an hour, and then I decide it's time for me to go. But being famish it's a nice introduction, and we never get tired of it. We had a speaking event I mentioned on Sunday night. I was MC of, and I had my Apollo blue suit, which I liked a lot. So I don't fit into the old suits anymore. I picked up 10 or 15 pounds. I can't shake it. I really want to. Anyway, the Apollo suit was great, but I had meant to get the pants hemmed, and I didn't. The pants are 5 inches too long. So I just talked with Natasha. You want to wear jeans and a blazer? It's like, yeah, it's kind of a fancy event. So we went to Macy's, just down the street from us, and we were late. I mean, I told them I would be there at 4:30, but they wanted me there at 5, so I aimed for 4:30, and we got to Macy's at like 3:45. So I was late, and we needed help from a saleswoman because I had to buy a suit real fast. And we went up to this woman, and she was helping this gentleman. His 30s maybe, something like that. And we said, I'm so sorry to bother you. It's just we're in a tremendous time crush here. Do you think we could borrow you for just 1 second? And the woman kind of thinking about it, and the guy who she was helping said, absolutely. You definitely should take care of Bill Whittle first. Like, what? Natasha and I just looked at each other, and I just immediately just shook his hand and just said, thank you, wow, thank you. That's so kind. Comes out of nowhere, just out of nowhere, just out of nowhere. I remember the first time it came out of nowhere. I was at a hockey game. I was at a Kings game, and somebody turned around and kept looking at me, and I looked back at him and was, "Are you Bill Whittle?" I said, "Yeah." Oh, yeah. What a life. Anyway, I had a lot of fun tonight. I really did. And for the two of you that may have been interested in this background, I hope it was fun for you. Phil, if you're watching, I owe my life to you, man. I really do. And a number of other people who aren't watching. But one of them who is watching is my beautiful wife. And she's watching right now. And the second I hang up this conversation, I'm heading home. So special shout to those two people who are so important to me, and especially to everybody else. Strata Loungers are just been great. People come up to me, and it's like I've known him forever. When that guy said my name, I just shook his hand. I asked him who he was and how, I just wanted to find out about, thank you. So anyway, there's still pride that needs to be beaten out of me, and I'm still taking my lumps for this. The NRA thing was a big lesson in vanity and the price you pay for it. But I'm a better person than I was then, and that's mostly due to that Russian girl. When I say mostly, I mean exclusively. All right, so that'll do it. Thank you again to the members at BillWhittle.com, to all the Strata Loungers out there, but especially to the people who part with some money every month, keep the lights on here and give me the life that I've had. And I've got a 10-part series. It's about the Cold War, and that's taken a lot of time, but I think that's going to be excellent. I really think it's going to be good. I got a lot of good feelings about it. And I have to get to work on that too. All right, so that'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge. Thanks again for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to talking to everybody. And if you're one of those people out there who are feeling sad and lonely, you can get out of it. It's not easy, but you can do it. And if you need help with that, you just contact me at info@billwhittle.com, and I'll get that email probably Monday. But I mean it. If you don't want to talk about it in the comments section here, or if you're watching it on YouTube or whatever, and any of this stuff means anything to you, just let me know at info@billwhittle.com, and we'll talk. Because people who help me, I can't help them, but I pay it forward. Anyway, thanks for joining us. It's been a great night, a lot of fun, and thanks for the very kind words about the FAMs. And we'll see you next week right here on the Stratosphere Lounge.